Hello and welcome to anyone watching this video. This is just a brief video about fitting a Stanley blade into a Spear & Jackson 9.5 block plane. In a previous video I've done an overview of the Spear & Jackson block plane and I think it's well made for the money. The blade I got was usable, but from messages that I've received, some blades are dodgy to say the least. So I mistakenly thought that was down to poor blade preparation and sharpening, but that doesn't seem to be the case, and people who know how to sharpen a blade are still having issues with it. So I did mention that in that video that the Stanley blade and the Spear & Jackson blade were the same size, but it's not quite that simple. So I'm just going to briefly run through how to get the Stanley blade to fit. They're about £8.50 I think on Amazon, that's all they are for a Stanley blade, and it still makes the plane cheap even if you buy a blade to go in it. If you've got a plane, one of these, and you're struggling with the blade, this is a way to get around it, and it works really well, and it lifts the plane to a different level. So the first thing to mention is that the original blade, this one, I noticed it was favouring one side on the adjuster, which I thought was machining of the actual bed itself, but it turned out not to be that. It was just simply that these slots that have been cut in the blade weren't quite wide enough to one side. So if you can see the one that I've put the permanent marker on there, I just use a needle file to take a little bit out of there, and that was all it needed. All it's done is centralise that slot in the blade. They've done a bit haphazard in how they've cut those out. This end of the blade isn't hard, so it files quite readily, and it just needed maybe a millimetre and a half just filing out of that one side, and then the adjuster was bang on. It's because when the blade was in, and you did your lateral adjustment there, it hadn't got enough movement there wasn't enough slot in the blade to move around the depth adjustment. That small nib that you can see in there was fouling, so when you did that adjustment there, it actually rode over the top of that and made the blade act a bit peculiar. So that if you happen to have a reasonable blade, which this one I have is reasonable, then you can just realign that slot slightly, and that'll straighten the adjuster up. Also, when you've done that, a square blade will square up on it without any problem. Now to the Stanley blade. I bought one of these fully expecting just to go straight in, because I'd put them side by side and they seemed identical to me, but it turns out that they're not, but only very slightly. So the first problem I had was when I put the blade in, it wouldn't sit in between the lateral adjuster there. That lateral adjuster there wouldn't come through the blade. You could either say the adjuster was too big, or the hole in the blade was too small, the slot. So it wouldn't sit, it was sitting up like that and wouldn't work. So all I did with that was, again, this blade, it's only this section that's hard, the back of it isn't hard, so I just took a file and just flattened both sides off, just to smooth them off. You're probably only talking about 1/2 mil each side, and then that will sit it will sit straight in then and adjust really nicely. In fact, because it sits so well, there's no play in it. The next thing I found was that the Stanley blade is just a little bit longer, and I wouldn't have thought that would make any difference, but it does, because where it makes a difference is if you line the slots up on the adjusters. It's slightly, the Stanley one has slightly more meat in that corner there, in that radius. And then because it's about 3mm longer, maybe 3.5mm longer, it meant that when you put the Stanley blade in, even though you'd widen this and it was all sitting in nicely, this part of the blade here where the radius was, it was catching the lateral adjuster, so it wouldn't sit properly. So the solution to that was a simple one. I did think about trying to take some out of the radius, but then I thought, well, the slot will still be in the same place, so that's probably not the way to go. So what I did was I shortened the Stanley blade by about 3.5mm to just ground it off and re-ground it. And then it fits perfectly. It fits perfectly, it adjusts perfectly, and it is a worthwhile upgrade. And if you've got one of these and it's got a bad blade in, obviously you can't use it, then for £8.50 it still makes a cheap block plane. And let me get that into focus if we can. And the adjustment is now perfect on it. So the actual adjustment from left to right wasn't actually the plane that was at fault, it was the wonky slots in the blade. So that now is working great, and as you can see, the adjuster's central, that blade square and the adjuster's central. So if you've got one of these and the blade's let you down, then adapt a Stanley blade to fit. It's a worthwhile upgrade, it's a lot better blade, I have to say. Even though mine was usable, the Stanley one is better. So that was just a brief video to update that and maybe help somebody out who's got a bad blade and can get their plane back working again. I have been using it a bit more, and I'm still really pleased with the way it works. For the money, it's an absolute bargain, and bang another blade in, and it's an, you know, you're there. It's a good block plane for the money. So that was just a quick video. Thank you for watching, and take care.